All right, Zach, step one, welcome. How are you today?
Doing great, Alex. Thank you so much for joining me on this amazing adventure that we're going on. I think I put a question mark at the end of that for some reason.
Thank you for asking me.
Yes, I'm grateful to be here. Thank you guys for joining us. What an amazing thing that we get to do here today. The 12 steps, Alex.
That's right.
The 12 steps. What are the 12 steps?
That's such a good question. Well, I think, some people may be listening, may be familiar with the 12 steps, others maybe not. And so I think, people call it a design for living or a program for living. And I know for me, it's basically a way that reorganized my life, or some people call it, the program. And basically, I think about it as a way to sort of reprogram myself, almost like a computer patch on a faulty, buggy system. How do you understand the 12 steps, or how would you explain them to a layman?
Well, that's an interesting concept about the program and whatever programming I came with, it became evident at some point, a few years back that it was not helping me to live a bigger, better life and be a better version of myself day by day. I was going the opposite direction. So it was kind of like a necessary structure that was plugged in that I learned how to do. They have these free classes called meetings, and and it was like let's go learn how to let's relearn how to do life and see if we can just start fresh. And the craziest thing is that it works. It actually is a thing that works for some reason. But I like that idea of programming. I heard this hypnotist speak, and he talked about mostly what hypnotism is breaking people out of a trance. That we tend to be in a trance throughout the day because we're our mind's set on something, and we're we're acting that out, kind of going through it. And so really hypnotism is learning about how to break yourself out of a thinking pattern and then do a new thinking pattern and say, okay, what's the recipe for doing my taxes? Okay, now I'm gonna go do my tax. What's the recipe for working out? I'm gonna go work out now. So it's interesting that they use that word program. People do sometimes refer to this thing as a cult. And, except for, I think the Kool-Aid is probably not spiked with anything.
Well, that's the idea.
Yeah, yeah. So is that a complete analysis from your perspective, or?
Yeah, I think the difference between a matrix download program and I think the 12 steps is there's a whole lot of work you got to do. For me at least, it's kind of you have to repeat these messages and receive that information repeatedly for it to get kind of deeper and deeper into my brain, so that becomes part of a kind of automatic mind of me being more conscious, more clear-headed, being honest, all these kind of principles that we'll go through these various episodes to start this show. So I wish it was just a download, but it's ended up being a lot of work. Or they say it's simple, but it's not easy. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's probably a download the first time, the first time your dad yelled at you or something, for instance, that one's dad would yell at somebody,
You talk to my father?
No, but I'd like to, yeah. You get programmed instantly, don't do that, or fire on the stove, ow,
right.
That hurts. And unless you're a psychopath, which, if you're watching this podcast.
It's been said before.
Yeah, you usually learn those things immediately. That's a good way to program things, right?
What's also interesting, you mentioning that, it's interesting, a lot of the programming we bring into our lives is so fear and pain avoidant rather than going towards the things we want. And so I think I've learned a lot of lessons around how to avoid problems, how to avoid confrontation, things I don't want, but that don't necessarily serve me. Or it's if you're learn that, if you touch the pan, you burn your hand, well, you may end up never going to the kitchen again, and then, you starve to death.
Right, yeah, the kitchen is okay, but this hot stove, right.
So I think it's that, part of the program, or relearning some of this stuff, has been just kind of calibrating that knob on what's helpful behavior and what's over the top. And so it's not so much go this crazy other direction, but hey, maybe consider this weighting of this idea a little bit more heavily. Mm-hmm. So maybe rather than talk about all this abstract stuff, on this first episode, I think we're going to talk mostly about step one. Yeah?
Yeah, but can we take a little tea?
We can.
The first thing I want to do. The first thing I want to do is kind of talk about Okay, look, we're really being vulnerable here. Okay, I want to just cover a couple things and kind of like grant permissions, create some language around some of this stuff. Like, first of all, this is my first podcast. I know that you're successful in this realm already.
Well, that puts like a whole lot of expectation on me.
let's just say
it's my first.
Low expectations.
Yeah.
We're a couple people having a conversation that found our way one way or another to having a necessity to find something that would work for us, because we on our own, we're not doing a good job living our own lives and leading our own lives. So we needed help to do that. We found the 12 steps, and although it's like this kind of insane, like to me, we kind of are on the fringe if we're getting to the 12 steps. It's like the 12 steps are like the ropes to keep you in the ring.
Right. It's like last stop before real trouble.
Exactly. And I'm still like trying to slip through the ring and like grab a chair and go crazy and, jump into the audience. And so like, but I'm still in the ring. And, to me, it's like I'm a third generation 12 stepper. So, sorry for violating some anonymity there on my grandfather.
Now we've violated it.
Well, my family is full of 12 steppers by one form or another. Not always, drinking or drug related, but there's a lot of different ways to do the 12 steps. But it's this crazy technology that somehow makes people able to change in ways that they were previously unable to do so. And it works for people with the craziest conditions in their lives that, like, they love this stuff more than their children on like not like a real heart level, but like on like I'll drive my kids drunk to school in the morning. Like that kind of, like that's the kind of stuff that you hear and many, many other things people kill for drugs. But, there's, so if you love this thing that much and you're willing to walk away from it and change, like I want to know what that crowbar looks like.
Yeah.
And that crowbar in this metaphor is the 12 steps.
It's a metaphor.
It's metaphorical. So like to me, that's something that needs to be said. Now I also, not to hog, the mic for a second here, but
hog it.
I'm gonna hog it up for a second.
Serve it.
I'm gonna go hogging, and I want to just say, like, we're gonna be offensive. I was surviving by telling terrible jokes. Like at the end of my drinking, like I had no joy in my life except to drink.
Yeah.
And to tell terrible jokes. Like it was something
that was
about
the whole
that.
thing. Huh?
It was the whole thing,
Oh,
and I just lived to do that. I would put myself in situations to have those things happen.
Yeah.
So some of that still is around, and I don't think it's unwelcome, to, like if we're facing the gallows, which is how I felt like I was living life, I gotta have a good time. We're gonna cuss, we're gonna tell crazy stories, we're gonna get spiritual a little bit, we're gonna talk about, like, if there was another way to change without talking about God, I definitely would have done that way. If there was another, or higher power, whatever you want to call it, like, I like that higher power. We'll get into that stuff. Like, it's a different way of talking about it. That's what this whole thing is. It's a different way to talk about all these old things that weren't serving us. It's a different way to think about it. And if you are brave, you might try to apply it, even though you may not have like your life isn't headed off a cliff because of some addiction or something. You might try this stuff because like normal people have this come up for them. And then they get back and they have these amazing lives, and it happens pretty quick. Yeah. Like within like a couple months or a year, like you're right back to probably a better spot than you were ever at in life before, even before addictions and stuff. So
yeah, and it's kind of like, I've talked to people like, oh, you're like, so you're never gonna drink or like do drugs the rest of your life, and it's like, well, yeah, I live in like a consistent, peaceful state most of the time. It's not a hard trait to make, and I don't think that's just a thing that lost drug addicts are looking for, but I think anybody, like if you could connect to wisdom or peace, there's something useful in that. And I mean, you maybe don't need to, steal from your mother and be homeless to figure that out.
Right.
But it's probably useful for people either way.
Yeah, you may not love your addiction that much, or you might have six things.
You just don't know how to love. I knew how to love those things,
Oh yeah, like that one thing. And that's probably a good thing is like, we're gonna get into the first step in a few minutes, but like, there's this, my life became about one thing. And that was like this very, it was the top of my priorities. And I wouldn't have been able to put this into words, but every day I wanted alcohol.
Right, your actions put it into truth.
Absolutely. And I was sacrificing good things for that. Especially at the end. It started slow. It started very honestly through college. I mean, normal drinking, normal stuff. But, it ended me up at this spot. And I'm just saying, like, it became one thing
Yeah.
So it became very easy to spot. It was one thing that was also toxic at the levels I was consuming it at the end. And that became a clear marker. So the thing is like, I want people to join us in this conversation. I want you to be able to, leave behind, like if there's a part of your life that you want to get better at, I'd love for you to, join us in this.
Yeah.
We're going to have a conversation about like the principles behind each step.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, we all have principles. We're all putting them into action. We probably don't have any awareness of that. So this is a framework about, what is it that we truly believe in, and how are we putting that into action? We're going to examine some of those things.
And I hear from some of what you're saying is kind of like I've heard in meetings it said like look for the similarities and not the differences. So you may not look exactly like us or have the exact same story, but maybe there are things that are similar, and we're just like two dudes doing our best here. So we'll do our best.
Yeah. So join us along, and this is a big open-hearted invite, and so. The other thing about this is that I think is apropos, if I may use a very hoity-toity word.
French.
Mais oui, monsieur. There is a certain je ne sais quoi about America right now.
Okay.
And the subtitle of this series is 12 Steps for America. So the idea of it's kind of like America's a family. Okay, and America. There's some signs that there's some sickness, and what I mean by that, specifically, CDC just released a whole bunch of stuff about during the crises that have been going on for the last few months with COVID, the race riots, and all these things. There's way more mental health related fatalities and incidents right now. It's like skyrocketed, and drinking and drugging is like way up. So these are hard stats.
And I thought it was interesting, like as part of when they did all this quarantine stuff, they kept alcohol stores open actually because the health implications of shutting down all these drunks or people that use that are dependent upon it would have overwhelmed the healthcare system in line with, in parallel to all the pandemic stuff.
Oh, totally. Well,
that's probably not a good sign.
Well, but there's plenty of people that were like in those long lines in Colorado, before they reopened them. They closed them down and then they reopened them. But there were people in long lines that weren't alcoholics. Probably most of those people are not alcoholics, but probably every alcoholic was in a line.
Yeah.
So what is it about things that we use in our lives to paper over some of the I don't want to go to a dark place. I'd rather not. And so there might even be, there might be a lot of people that have a couple drinks a night kind of thing, and they don't have an issue with being able to put it down, but it's more like, what are you missing out on? And so that's kind of this greater idea of like, we found something. Like we went crazy and we were drinking our asses off and we almost died, and drinking and drugs or whatever. But like, we got to a point where something amazing happened on the other side, and we realized that all we were doing was running from pain and things that were unpleasant, probably based on some programming that wasn't even really our fault. But if we took responsibility for it, all of a sudden we got all this great meaning in our lives, and we were able to change like quickly and get to a place that would like to be a better version of ourselves, a great version of ourselves in a pretty limited amount of time, by kind of working through some of this stuff and turning into the pain. Which is counterintuitive, but, turning into the pain as opposed to running from it. And, finding out where is this coming from, doing an investigation. And probably healthy people are already doing this in some sense. So if you're doing that, that's great. But there's probably something in all of our lives that we are doing it with a little bit of like, I'm going to avoid reality for a little bit. And then it can sneak up on you. And so I want to make an invite to like everybody. Maybe there's probably a better life for all of us, and like we never hit 100%, but maybe we're at 90% and we want to get to 95. Maybe we're at 50% and we want to get to 55 or 80%,
I can't do the math.
That's a lot of numbers. Yeah. So that I would just hope is a big invite to everybody.
Cool.
Okay. Last thing, as long as we're going to do this, I got to do another quick disclaimer. For all my 12-steppers out there who live by some of the traditions, and they're going like, there's a tradition that says anonymity at the level of press, radio, and film. This probably falls under that in some sense, and maybe it also doesn't fall under that in some sense because we're kind of moving forward. It's a way more mainstream topic these days because it's a symptom of mental health. Addiction goes with mental health. Mental health is, we know it's, if you've got anxiety, if you've got depression, if you've got stress, if you're medicated, you got mental health issues. I hate to tell you. And there's ways to deal with that beyond just the pharmaceutical route. And these are, this is what the 12 steps is. It's like, it's a way beyond that. I'm not saying get off your drugs. I'm saying that this can help you change in ways similar to pharmaceuticals, hard drugs.
And I guess the idea is maybe like we're not spokesmen on behalf of AA. We're just two guys sharing what we know and what we've learned from our lives and doing our best here, but don't claim to be anything more than that.
Exactly. And we are going to have to quote, we attend certain meetings in certain groups, and you're not even supposed to talk about like which groups you go to. But I've had issues with alcohol, and there's this great fellowship out there that concerns alcohol. And the literature, we're going to be quoting the literature. This is where the 12 steps originated, is in the literature it's in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. So we're going to be quoting out of that at times, and we're going to be talking extensively about those things because these are where the gems are. So if anybody's upset about that, well, please put that at the door and come on in
with us.
Come on in. The resentments are just fine.
Sweet.
So, why do you need the 12 steps? What happened to you? You're a smart, successful guy. Sensitive, wonderful.
Well, just so much. Well, what a question. I think, from a young age, I think I had like a sense of discomfort, not being a part of things, like I think anxious in different ways, and just never really like felt at ease in myself. And then I can remember being at like a wedding when I was like 12 and having like a glass of champagne and just being like, oh baby, like this is that stuff. I was like dancing, I smoked a cigar. I think I got sick. But I just kind of brought that ease that it seemed like everybody else sort of had. Or I remember like played ice hockey growing up, as you may know you did too.
Oh, so me.
And I remember like hurting my elbow and the doctor gave like some kind of painkiller. And I remember just like love it. I was like, I don't know what this is about, but I like it. I always just felt this attraction to substances, alcohol, and mostly like stimulants to feel better, stronger, more, and there's just sort of this unending sense that I was not good enough, no matter how good looking, how good my grades were, what college I went to, what money I had, what job I had, what company I started, this endless kind of insufficiency. And so that sort of just played out, especially when I got to college, and I was like, oh, like, before that I kind of like felt a lot of pressure to go to a good college, and then I got there, I was like, all right, like, now it's on. Like I get to like get messed up every night and have sex with strangers. Like this is gonna be wonderful. I saw these movies and now I'm gonna live it. And that was cool for like 2 months, and then I just sort of progressively lost friends and increased the substances I was using. I got exposed specifically to like Adderall in college. It was like the first to do work, but I noticed, hey, I wanted to chat with people. I could stay up more. I was more social. And it was just all these things. I felt more me, bigger and more important or something. And that just sort of progressed into other, friendly, common stimulants, and found myself all over the world. I was in the Peace Corps in Panama and found trouble for myself down there. I came back to the US, was working in finance, and basically ended up hospitalized after not sleeping for like basically months on end. I won this competition called I almost just died, called the Bill Gates Innovation Challenge. And I invented this way to connect rural communities to phone service in Panama, where I lived, where there was no phone service. And actually, after I did the work of like 30 men on Adderall in like 2 months, and started this company, made a website, shot a video, applied to this competition, won this competition, got flown out to DC to meet Bill Gates. I met Bill Gates, and then was so exhausted, I basically had a psychic break. I decided I could actually scream at the top of my lungs at 3 a.m. at my father's house and create a second instance of the Big Bang, which didn't work, I don't think. Instead, I ended up in a hospital, and then I was hospitalized, and I'm at the hospital, listen, I just met Bill Gates. And they're like, okay, dude.
Sure you did.
Yeah, me too. And then from there was just a major wake-up call, something's off track in my life. I have friends going to medical school at Harvard Business School, and I'm like, with people who are hearing like rats talk to them through the walls, and it was just not where I expected to be, and found myself, as past family members of mine have found themselves, actually initially in a meeting inside of this, psych ward, basically. I remember the guy that like brought it in. It was like the only source of hope in this like very scary place and point in my life. And the guy, I really wanted to get out, but the doctors didn't think I ought to go yet. And so this guy's like, I can help you get out. And I think he meant like he can help me find a place to like go after I was released. But I thought this guy was gonna like break me out of this place. So he was like, just give me a call. And so he like left after this hour-long A meeting, and I ran over to the phone, which like the nurses can listen to, and called him. I was like, all right, like what's like the plan? And this guy's like, just call me tomorrow.
Yeah, we're gonna do the steps, and we're gonna,
It was a different path, and I was ready for like instant, impatient like results,
That's great.
And then from there, basically started on a path of getting sober and kind of figuring out how I got to where I was. It wasn't, I can't say just a perfect smooth road from there, but that's sort of what I have found is if I left to my own devices, I end up being very delusional, like self-aggrandizing, and alone and super high. And like, it's not a great life. There've been nights like I've taken like so many stimulants, I've thought I'm having a heart attack and prayed to God, just sad that was the end of my life, and so glad that that's not happening anymore. But, and my regular way of processing through the world, that's where I end up. And so I found the only thing that's worked for me between, women, lying, like trying to have an important job, working myself to death, exercising to death, has been this program and being part of a community. And it's really the only community I've ever really felt a part of. Or it's like, unfortunately the one I'm like, shit, like I think that's where, these are my people, And it's been, I thought it was about getting just sober, and like, oh crap, I have a major problem, which is basically what step one is. And it turns out it's about a lot more. It's like, how do I live in this world, in this life, on life's terms, or in a state of honesty? And so it means much more to me than just like avoiding alcohol. Avoiding alcohol is a pretty simple thing. You just don't go to like liquor stores. But like, how do I avoid the things that make me want alcohol and drugs? And how do I live a life that doesn't need them is why I need this program.
So instead
That's a good story.
That's a great story.
Thank
Can
you
we
very
do
much.
that? Oh man, I feel like we're gonna get a lot of bro comments. Yeah, I can feel it now. Yeah, woo. Yeah, it's not a big deal. We're just a couple bros, just love sober things. Yeah, so in your story, so we should probably say like the first step is we admitted we were powerless over this thing that we have figured out is like kind of connected to all of our issues. Okay, so
it could be alcohol, it could be work, it could be whatever ism you want to project your problems into, basically.
Correct. Yeah, like my wife came up with this great one. She's not an addict alcoholic, but she is deciding to do the steps because she wants to like participate, and she's got, she just wants a better relationship with whatever this gets you into a better relationship with, which is all the good things, I think. And she was saying, and this cut me deep, she was like, I think the thing that I'm most powerless over is how I'm so negative in my self-talk. She's like, I cannot stop talking negatively to myself. And I was like, that's probably my first addiction.
Right.
Honestly, like I was like, that was my issue my whole life. And then when I met alcohol, it was the solution to that problem.
Yeah.
And it was like, so yeah, so,
what do you do for fun? I just like am really shitty to myself.
Yeah, I just hate myself into action, and I'm playing Division I hockey, so I guess it's must be going pretty well. Honor roll,
Good job.
Thank you. I just wanted to, well, I'm just trying to say, like, look, we're like we were normal or even exceptional in some ways, and I mean, both of us. This is not just for the guy at the intersection with the brown bag in his backpack with the sign, like those are our people, but it's the CEO, it's the famous athlete, it's the famous musician, probably magician too, actually.
Okay.
A lot of the great musicians, a lot of the great comedians, and and some of those things follow a late night crowd and parties, and you just get into it,
Yeah.
But some of it's people that are working a 9-to-5 job, and they're just having 6 to 12 most nights or whatever. I mean, you hear
I
a
like
lot of
that.
different things.
I work 9 to 5 and then I do 6 to 12.
Yeah.
That's good.
I think that should be,
fierce.
it's probably a t-shirt somewhere.
That's good.
Let's be honest.
We'll make a website.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, we will do that. So the first step is we admitted we were powerless over, insert the thing here that you may have an issue with.
You love more than your children.
Yeah, we're gonna break this down more than just that. So we admitted we were powerless over X, and that our lives had become unmanageable. So there's these two parts of that, kind of 1A and 1B is, we were powerless over alcohol for me, and our lives had become unmanageable, and that puts you into a cycle.
Right.
So once I start this thing that I'm powerless over, for me it was like once I have one drink, I don't know where that's going to end me. Sometimes it was just, a couple, I'd have 2 or 3 drinks and I'd go to bed, and then sometimes I would
Have
drink.
a family.
Exactly, yeah. And then I'd have real problems. Like I would, be driving drunk to the liquor store at 11:55, and I lived walking distance from the liquor store. I always found myself living in like I picked places that had me living walking distance from the liquor store, but I had an unmanageable enough life that I'd still find myself driving at 11:55 because I mismanaged the time.
Right.
So I once I have one, I don't know if that's going to end me up in like detox or jail, locked up or covered up. I don't really have any control over that anymore. It got to that point where I couldn't honestly say, I don't know if I'm just going to have one, even though that was the thing that got me to have the one.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the last drink that was killing me, it was the first drink, ironically. So I just had to figure out a way to not have the first drink. The unmanageability part of the cycle is what's going on in my life that even if I have a terrible experience or many terrible experiences, I find myself back at like the thinking of, I'm gonna go get that first one. I've taken 3 weeks off, I've been good, and I think I can go and I'm gonna go celebrate. And just boom, immediately back to this old way of thinking. And once I have one, again, I don't know, and the cycle repeats itself. So that's kind of this 1A and 1B. There's more to it.
Well, it strikes me that, there's a lot of like kind of subtle things embedded that are sort of implicit in that first step as well. One is, obviously the first word is we. It's not, I am unmanageable or my problems, it's from the get-go, this is a different set of sort of identity features. It's not just me alone, or I've heard people say addiction or alcoholism is a state of isolation or loneliness. And so it's just very interesting. The first word of all the steps is we, right? And it's like, actually, you're just me, like we're just the universe talking to ourselves. And this sense of me being able to get outside of myself is critical. And then also this, in part B of that sentence, that our lives had become unmanageable, that I think we'll find this in another step later on, but this assumption that actually our lives became that way, but that means that they weren't that way at some point. That actually, it basically assumes, it's very hopeful to me that like, we came from some state of not completely fucked, right? And actually, I'm not going to some new place that's like, I don't know about. Actually, I'm just returning back to a kind of more pure or healthy or well self that I was born into. And you can, I think, take that to any level of kind of religious meaning that you want, or just the sense that like we're born babies, like innocent and sweet, and life takes us on paths. But just helpful to me to think like I'm not going to like off to the edge of the map. Like I'm just going back to where I came from, and that's also just an implicit part of that whole sentence.
So you said we, and I love that about the, from an I to we. And by the way, it's past tense. It's like you go to one of these meetings and they're sitting there admitting things, but they're like laughing about it. They admit things so often about the human condition and how dishonest, like, oh man, I wanted to lie today, like, and I caught myself this time, but I didn't get, like honesty is the principle of this step, right? One of the two principles. So we're going to get to that in a second, but it's we admitted. It's like this past tense thing. Like you go to a meeting and it's people like sitting around, like they're telling you in past tense, like, well, this is what we did to get well. Okay, so one of the things the first thing we did to get well was we admitted we were powerless over this thing, and our lives had become unmanageable. And if you go to a meeting, a lot of those meetings are discussing, they're welcoming for new people who have they don't know what the hell it is. But you go in there and you hear these people telling these amazing truths, like driving drunk with their kids in the car, or coming to in jail, and they have a counselor talking to them, telling them that they murdered somebody while they were blacked out. You know, like that's a job description that's a role that exists in the world. You know, a counselor that tells people most of the violent crime is related to alcohol and drugs. Like by far, it's related to alcohol and drugs.
Right.
And most of the time, or often, people have no idea that they did it the next day. You know, they were in a, you know, chemical induced state. So anyway, like, what? Tell me about this word admitted. Why is that word there?
I like that. And so, you know, it's not, I guess, it's like admission to a fair, right? Like the fair is happening either way. Like you're fucked either way. It's just like, are you going to basically accept it or allow that into yourself and realize that like the rest of the world you're already living the implications of it, right? Like I'm lonely, I don't have friends, I'm physically unwell, and it's like, can I like actually recognize it? And it's almost like the first step towards a like touching back into reality, essentially. I'm doing all this work to like not admit this thing, but it's like the whole world is that thing, you know? And so I just think it's like, okay, I'm gonna swallow that pill and like, okay, this is a problem, you know?
The full measure. Like I'm taking it.
It's like, yep.
Yeah, we keistered it. It's a reverse inhale. We're gonna make some movie quotes in too, guys. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, so I think it's just that it's funny because usually, at least for me, I was in such a state of pain that like being a not that was so easy at that point. Like everything had become so bad that like being like, okay, I guess I can't drink and like I'm alcoholic was a much sweeter thing at that point than having to keep going on with what I was doing. So you finally can be like, okay, like I guess this is the situation. And they say, you know, the only step that you have to get 100% right is that first step. Like you can't be on the fence like, maybe if I only drink on Tuesdays after like, you know, full day work, I could be okay. Like it's sort of the only black and white thing I think that people insist on.
And no matter what the consequences are, I'm going forward.
Yeah.
Like that's the idea. Like, okay, like, because to me, like, all I know about my life is that it's down here and alcohol takes it up to here, you know? And so when I'm thinking about no alcohol, I'm thinking about, well, I'm going to have a fucking terrible life then.
Right.
And coming to the point of like, I probably already have a terrible life then.
Yeah.
And then this alcohol thing, I can see it's like making it worse. I didn't think that I was like an alcoholic, but I could see that I was having some major issues around it. I was starting to wake up in weird places, like looking at bars, you know.
Smells.
And luckily I was like, where am I? And they were like, you're in detox. And I was like, I'm not in jail? And they're like, no, you're in detox. I'm like, yes, I'm not in jail. And they're
That's
like,
the good news.
You're in the self-harm unit of detox where we can keep an eye on you because you said you were going to hurt yourself. And I was like, right, okay.
So not jail?
So not jail, though. Yeah, so, you know, and so we're kind of demonstrating the principle behind the first step, which is honesty, all right? And like, to this day, I still get goosebumps telling these stories because it feels good to be honest.
I do see real goosebumps.
They're real, yeah. Like I'm excited, I'm juiced right now because when you tell these stories out loud and possibly,
it's juiced.
You know that. Well, honesty is contagious. You know, honesty is this very healthy thing that is extreme. It can be hurtful, you know. So you want to have some grace in it. And what I found is, in person to person, you know, meeting these people in 12-step groups, like they're very graceful people. They're like. They love new people. They're like, we know you hate yourself. You don't have your magic juice that makes you feel good right now. And we are going to love you until you love yourself.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we're going to tell the same stories that you think only you have. And we're going to tell them in this really, you know, wonderful way about like, we have all of this perspective on it now.
It's like they only know part of the story, whereas other people know like a fuller story.
Yeah, like they were reading my diary back to me. I was convinced that I was like, there was nobody else like me. They didn't have the responsibilities that I had of like, you know, I was supposed to do all this good in my life. I was failing in every aspect. And all of a sudden, like these people are like, oh man, I felt like such a failure, and you know, and I didn't identify with everything, but then I was like, well, I never got a DUI, you know, but I was driving drunk regularly. I just organized my life because I'm smarter than everybody, you know, to live 5 minutes, you know, like a 2-minute drive to the liquor store and back roads. And I gave myself a pass saying, oh, that's okay. So like I'm driving drunk next to the people with their kids in the car while they're driving drunk, and I'm like, in the first meeting, I'm hearing their stories about driving drunk with their kids in the car.
These degenerates.
And I'm like, you can believe these guys, and meanwhile, I'm out there, swerving at everything probably.
Yeah.
So like you come to experience that I was in a prison of sorts. Drinking made me feel like I got out of prison, but then ultimately it was like this bigger prison that I couldn't see called addiction.
Prison of the mind.
Yeah, the mind. Isn't that amazing? So I want
honesty is the way out of that prison. You're telling me.
That's the way. Because look, it's. We're gonna get deeper into this. This whole program is basically about what program are you running currently. Let's investigate that.
Right.
And probably most people are turning off the fucking podcast right now because they're like, it's running fine. I don't need it. It's good.
Like
the kids are happy. The wife is,
You're just like my mother.
It's fine. I'm just gonna go and grab a thing of Oreos and yeah, I'm fine.
And that's the thing, I guess, is like if we're computers or whatever, like we're on. Like you don't get a choice, and there's something running, right? So we might as well clean it up and make it work well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That was a nice, tidy little. Yeah. So, where were we?
We're right here.
We are right here. I was leading into something.
Honesty is the best policy.
Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah. So honesty is this amazing thing that kind of like, I was so like it was my best friend in drinking. I was using it all the time. It hurt me a little bit every time I lied. I could feel it. I knew it wasn't right, and I just was like, yeah, this is the normal. I was used to drinking shots that burned as it entered you, but then it made you feel good. The lie would hurt, but I would say it probably, I didn't really realize that it was a function of my drinking at this point, but I was doing it so I could, not lose this job or pissing contests too, like trying to win an argument, that I couldn't remember. I was blacked out the night before, so I couldn't remember, but I remember it's still tense in the morning, so I'm like, oh, I need to pretend like it was, I'd like fish around. What were the details of that argument
Tell
again?
me again what you said.
Yeah, and I'd start it back
that.
up in the morning so I could win it.
Right.
Because I needed this constant affirmation that I was just a little bit better than everybody.
Right.
Because if I didn't have that affirmation, then I might have to sit with the possible truth that, well, my feelings tell me that I am way worse than that.
And I guess what strikes me, so there's honesty in the sense of telling lies. But I guess it strikes me as like the first lie is that like often that we are not okay, right? Like that's the real delusion is that I have to change myself, I'm not okay, I'm insufficient. And it's that lie that we then perpetuate 30 other lies, 30,000 other lies behind it. But I guess there's this sense of honesty, like actually the self-love honesty, like actually I'm a normal person on the face of the earth, like having this wild experience, and I'm okay. And I think to me that's like the real honesty is returning back to that in a sense that like I don't need to like change all these things, Well,
and it's like can a human embody the truth? Can we ever really understand the full capital T truth? I don't know is probably my best answer at that. I would maybe say no, but honesty is our relationship with whatever that mothership of truth is, And so it's like, all right, look, I'm going to try not to lie, out loud at first. Like, what happens is when you sit in a room that's honest like that, you start to realize how dishonest you are. Like you stick out like a sore thumb.
Right.
And you're like, oh my God. But then it's a relief because everybody else is like joking about it. And like after the meeting, you're like, I did the same thing. Like that's crazy. How did you, and we're laughing about like how dishonest it was. And for some reason, like that it feels good to just admit it finally.
Right.
And I think that word admit, like it does fit for me. I needed to get something off my chest because it was fucking killing me and I was in the gutter and it was time to start going the other direction. And so it's like when you have a life like that where not only are you directly telling lies to people, but you're also kind of living a lie. You have this bigger, like indirect honesty of like, I'm going to pretend I need to be distant with this person in order to not be
close
with them because it's going to benefit me. And I'm going to like lies of omission. Like I'm just not going to explain the full thing, the full story of what really happened last night. Or, when people are like, Jesus, you have a rough night? And it's like, oh, my girlfriend, bro, like it was,
Right.
It was like one of those types of things, which is these are these little white lies that escape the bigger lies of omission that I'm leaving out.
Yeah.
Like actually, because it's hard to just be like, well, yeah, I have a big drinking problem and I drink over everything and it's causing problems. As you can imagine, it's causing problems in every relationship in my life.
You're like, oh no.
Yeah, and I'm
So your girlfriend's mad, or
yeah, I'm slowly like shrinking as a man
I'm
on the
dying
inside.
inside.
And yeah, and I think this is a death rattle. Is what this is. Yeah. So you start telling the truth, and honestly, at the end of my drinking, my brain was starting to like not work like it once did.
Right.
And I would sometimes tell the truth about weird things. All of a sudden, it was like I started noticing that I was being dishonest, and so sometimes I'd be like way overly honest with like, a work colleague like about something, and they were like, you shouldn't probably say that
Don't
out
be
loud.
so
I actually had a couple
honest.
guys like, you probably shouldn't tell other people here, but it's great that you're.
All right, Zach. Do you know what the other principle is of the first step?
Do I know?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know, but then I, just came to accept that I didn't know, and then I asked, and it was acceptance.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's acceptance.
Yeah.
So, what does acceptance mean to you?
Yes.
In a word, yes.
I just think it's dealing with reality the way it is, that my role in the world isn't I get to go around and change and direct everybody and everything and distort things and lie in the event that things aren't going the way I want, but actually accepting things the way they are and being cool with it. Like, not just like people like, I accept that, I don't know, something bad. I'm trying to avoid so many offensive things from being said. I accept something bad, but instead I could be like, I don't just accept this cup is here, I fucking love this cup, it's gorgeous. It's so weird that this exists. This showed up here, you're here. And having that sort of sense of wonder around the things that are rather than what is just insufficient or lacking is kind of, to me, the elevated form of what acceptance is. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
That's beautiful. So yes and thank you?
Yes,
like a sense of gratitude?
Yeah, I like that. Holy shit.
What? Oh my God.
It's yes and thank you.
Okay, so does that... Okay, so we talked about this idea of if the drugs and alcohol go away and we just are left with this shitty life, so we're accepting kind of no matter what, I'm going to try and start practicing some gratitude forward. I'm going to just say yes to things.
Yeah.
Well,
it's also, I think in terms of the program or any sort of effort to improve oneself, I have to take stock of where things are. If I think I'm a billionaire but I'm actually homeless, I'm going to have a hard time getting my finances in order. You know what I mean? And so I think it's just being okay, this is the situation, whether I want it to be or not. And this is where I begin from.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's kind of you get a tree that is, malformed. You get a tree, and you get a tree.
A tree for everyone.
Yeah, Oprah. We love you, Oprah. Invite us on your show. When a tree has a branch that's not growing right. Mm-hmm. It's if that tree is going to make it, you got to go cut that sucker off.
Ooh.
And so, if you're going to prune the tree, and probably, it's good that we went there. Okay. It's probably, the sense that, we probably had probably everybody, I want to make this an everybody thing. Probably everybody has some emotional, malformations, in their development, they were told no, or they were told yes, or, they started probably overdeveloping in one way where they were getting the sunshine like a tree would, right? The acceptance or approval or the attention. Sometimes it was negative, and there are some people that thrive on negative attention, so they're going there. A lot of those people end up in the rooms, by the way. So you have this other part of you that may not be developing as much. And so kind of, I think what this thing is acceptance and truth is kind of accepting that you've got some parts, and this is kind of a question for everybody, do you have some parts that would be better if they were cut off or burned off? Not in a physical sense, but in a psychological sense. Do you have some things about you that you may not like, or you have noticed that people are looking at you with dead eyes because you're just droning it you're hot, there might be things, there might be, it's just, I'm speaking about, it's for a friend.
Sure.
That is there something going on
in the way between you and source,
Correct.
I
And so,
that
like
source.
to me, like this. Well, and like, what are the nutrients, coming into your life, the good stuff coming up from the roots.
Right.
That
It's almost
is
like-
here
it's
for
like
everybody.
If your like arm is numb and your fingers don't get blood and they get all tingly and weird, but you can't like use them,
Yeah, not in a way that we should talk about necessarily. Strangers aside. So yeah, it's kind of like that. Honesty is this sort of truth that you can go and like hack off these false parts of you. These parts that are not serving you, that are actually hurting you for continuing to have or try to support.
I see.
And it's kind of like, okay, so if we're going on a search here for like an investigation into what is healthy about my life and what is not healthy about my life, it's also kind of accepting if I find something that isn't true, I can make that decision later, but I want to try and find the willingness to take the truth and cut it out of my life, and I might be cutting off a lot of stuff. I was probably 95% bullshit.
It's what I've been, pardon me, is what I've been told is that like, you sort of have to raise all the buildings of these fictions and like distortions that I've created and just kind of clear everything out in order to start afresh. And that's what I think the truth or acceptance can do for somebody. Now let me ask you this. Do you know any spiritual leaders, enlightened folks that give you anything to think about in this realm?
Well, I modeled my haircut after him.
You did?
Yeah, I mean, he said, "Be the change in the world that you wish to see," and I was like, "This is a beautiful bald man. I'm gonna do my hair like this guy."
Bald man.
Yeah. So Gandhi, he had this thing in India. He led a peaceful
this thing going in
he had this
India.
little thing, So he led this peaceful revolution in India, and it was peaceful. It was nonviolent. And the names of his revolutionaries were Satyagrahis, based on these two Sanskrit words, Satra and Graha, which means truth force. Or he also translated it as like love force or soul force, but it's kind of like this idea of, it's kind of an invisible thing, and we're trying to find a better way. So he talked about it as a truth force. And so he went to the government and he was like, look, we're going to be nonviolent and we want to partner with you and find, use this, Satyagraha method to find if there are parts of this, relationship that we have with our people and our government that is not, justified, if it's creating undue pain for people. And so, this is, we're living in times that might be an appropriate thing to talk about. But it's also an idea of like, where does it matter if it doesn't matter at the level of the individual? And so this work is inherently like, look, if I want a revolution of what's going on with me and the bullshit that I have going on, and look, if we're going to admit it, like we probably all have bullshit that's going on in our lives. You don't have to be an addict or an alcoholic or, a wife beater or a road rager to know that you might have some things that are holding you back. Some moments that you seem strangely selfish or something like that.
Yeah.
So all we're doing here is like, we just want to shine a light of truth into these areas and say, is this really serving me?
Right. And then, maybe we'll get into this in the next episode, but it's surprising what ends up happening. It's not, you think it's like, oh, I got to avoid this dark thing, right? For you're only as sick as your secrets. And it turns out like light isn't so bad,
Yeah. So, and I would like to know that, like, if I open myself up to go to one of these meetings, did anybody like take your nose and like rub it in the shit that you created and been like, yeah, like did anybody?
They did.
Yeah. What was your sense of these things?
When I first got into the program, it was like, I was a disaster. I didn't even know, didn't know sort of the way these meetings are conducted and sort of a process of just like being in part of these groups that you only learn through experience, and just like any group or any meeting is conducted with a certain structure. And I was just like interrupting and like standing up inappropriately and like saying I didn't know what was what. And all I got back was like kind people gave me their phone number, which was like also this bizarre, like people like, hey, like take my number. I'm like, I don't know you. Like, what do you mean? But people like reach out and they're, people hug. And I think it's just this sense of care for people that they, it's something you don't know these new people entering the rooms. Nobody knew me, but like everybody that's in the program has been that person at some point and had the experience of other people helping them and can only later look back and say, oh shit, like I was a disaster and these people were doing that thing that I do for others now. And yeah, it was super uncomfortable, but it's because I was so uncomfortable being alive, you know. But it was the most welcoming place I've ever been.
So they handed you this new tool of honesty because you sit in that room and you get these amazing honest shares.
Yeah.
And they hand you this tool of honesty, and after a while, you start to apply it to yourself. You're like, okay, I don't want to join, but but then
it's 6 inches, okay? it's not 7. I've been saying 7.
Yeah, been measuring from the wrong point this whole time. Okay,
nobody tells you where to start from.
Yeah, exactly. It's clearly the side.
Okay, 6.5.
Or it's the knee. Yeah. So you get handed this new tool of honesty, and it's kind of like, okay, easy does it is one of the sayings, So easy does it, but we're gonna start asking some questions and let these questions let them kind of get in there with you and see what happens, and if you find that you do have some things that could change, maybe you might find a way to get into maybe you might qualify for this idea of moving through the rest of the steps. So it's hardcore, but it's like, how much pain are you in, And so for our non-alcoholic and non-drug addicted friends out there, I would like to just extend an invite to you guys to participate in this way. Try to go a whole week, if you're gonna wait a week or whatever. Try to go today without telling a lie.
Yeah.
And that's not to say don't, you only have to tell the truth.
Right. Like I don't have to call my mother and tell her everything.
Right, exactly. Like that's a difficult thing to figure out. But if you can keep it doesn't mean that you don't have to, you can't, I'm powerless over my brain's ability to produce lies, ready-made, like Krispy Kreme. It's just coming out factory ready, hot and gooey.
Sicily.
Yeah, and killing me. So like, can we go a whole 24 hours without
telling a lie.
Without telling a lie. Verbally, specifically. Right. And I will say, and I was actually going to make a different point about our non-alcoholic friends and family out there, non-alcoholic, non-drug addicted. There's, for you to participate in the first step, you might need to find some leverage around some pain, all right? So the way that I changed was my life was 360 degrees of pain. There was nothing left in my life. I had some good people in my life, but I wasn't allowing them in. I wasn't allowing them to love me.
You were the pain.
I was the pain, exactly. Like in here was all pain.
Yeah.
For a lot of people here, they're probably doing really well, and they just want to participate in something that's, because they're healthy people and they're watching this. So for them, like for you guys, I'd want you to find something in your life that is, if you focused completely on that thing, you might find some pain. And if you can kind of twist that knife a little bit, that like if you're going to get into some change, an actual change that is going to happen like today, it needs to like, we change all at once. This is like the Tony Robbins and me coming out right now. We don't change slowly over time. It happens all at once. It's like, you know what? I'm in so much pain. Not another second, not another minute, not another fucking hour. I'm never doing this again. And then you go and take an action later that day that like reaffirms that new direction and new path.
Right. So
for you guys, I'm sorry to say, you actually have the larger job. You might be like living the great life, but you got a harder job because you got to find something that is, painful enough that you can focus on it.
That's right.
And bring it to life.
Sufficient almost weight to ground you and help you to grow.
Because we're not leaving you behind. You're coming with us.
Come along.
There's another 11 steps. They're amazing. And Alex, what's your closing word today?
Door.
Speaking of the doors and the doors of perception,
the doors
obviously.
to enter into the 12 steps.
Don't let the door hit you in the ass.
Glad to get started here, and I guess I would say what I know I've learned for me is that in any process it has to be a marathon and not a sprint, and just that I'm always, if I can stick to a process and make it pleasant and interesting rather than like this frantic rush that like I have to do everything today and then I'm like, I can't do like cocaine level self-growth. Like I need to do a steady jog into things to make it sustainable. And so I would encourage people to hop on board for a very pleasant rolling boil of an experience with us.
Ooh, it's a rollicking boil. It's going to be great. Well, so we're going to sign off for now. Hit us up on social media. You'll have that info at the bottom third. And
Thanks for listening.
thanks for listening. See you next time.